Welcome to an introduction to Henry Lawson, The Loaded Dog. Notes for Module A, Distinctively Visual. The Loaded Dog was first published in 1901 in a collection entitled Joe Wilson and Friends. We begin, as always, by looking at the rubric. Our focus today is on how techniques create images. It is important that we all understand that techniques refer to anything involved in the construction of the text. The Loaded Dog is a comedy. We're introduced to three mates, Dave, Jim, and Andy, who are miners. However, they're not mining for most of the story. They're fishing, joking, and telling stories. Again, working men not involved in work. The event of the story is a wild plan that has gone wrong, and through the story, we explore the themes of mateship, ingenuity, and the identity of bush larrikins. The setting of the story is a simple and harsh Australian bush. The men live in a campsite not far from the claim. The weather is hot and unrelenting. The narrator states, "They had a cat that died in hot weather." And the only relief comes from a nearby creek, nothing more than a chain of muddy water holes. The story opens with a detailed description of life on the Australian goldfields. This is significant as the gold rush exists in the recent memory of Lawson's original audience. You may recall that Lawson lived on the goldfields for some of his very early life. As I stated before, the characters in this story are bush larrikins. Australian larrikins were young men with a complete disregard for authority. We've these days idolised them, but at the time they were causing a lot of trouble in Australia's cities. It is thought that bush larrikinism arose as a reaction to the corruption involved in Australian policing and politics in the early days of the colony. Unlike In a Dry Season, The Loaded Dog is told by a heterodiegetic narrator. This means the narrator is not a character in the story. We could also describe this as ulterior narration. The story has already happened when we're hearing about it. And it's very clear that the narrator is omniscient. This simply means that they know everything. Scient, coming from science, and omni, meaning all. An omniscient narrator is able to supplement the vision of the characters, so we see more than they are aware of, and this really contributes to the humour of the story. What follows is a list of literary techniques with examples from the texts. Attempt to organise your notes in a theme, technique, quotation table. Juxtaposition involves emphasising the difference between two things by placing two contrasting things directly beside each other. For instance, the overgrown pup and the vicious mongrel. These things are very different, and placing them together makes us really focus on that difference. Alliteration involves repeating the same first letter, usually a consonant, in subsequent words in a phrase or a sentence. So foolish, four-footed. F is the letter alliterated. Alliteration connects words together. It also emphasizes a phrase. It makes the reader focus on it. A simile is a direct comparison between two unlike things using the word like or as. So the tail, one item, is like. That's your direct comparison. A stock whip, that's your different image. Contrasting adjectives are used throughout the story to create really distinct images. We're not looking at sketches, we're looking at specific people and specific places in this story. We also see a lot of emotive language. Emotive language involves using the connotations of words to really pick up the way people feel and to build the emotional tension of a story. We know that we're not going to like the yellow dog. We don't like anything that's sneaking. We are going to like things that are described as brave or heroic. Okay? Using those connotations to build on the audience's emotion. I've also included a dash here as a technique because I think it's important that we remember punctuation is one of the ways the author creates a text. So the M dash here has been used to separate lists of specific features, all right? But any use of punctuation could be an important part of the creation of images. Lists are used to include as much detail as possible, and of course imagery is an important technique whenever we're thinking about the distinctively visual. Imagery really involves drawing on the senses, often sight, but also touch and hearing are quite common in writing. Lawson has used really short sentences to create the action of the story. But there's also lots of long descriptive sentences. These are the sentences that help us create the scene. These are the sentences that really help us involve ourselves in what's distinctively visual. Repetition, Australian idioms and sayings, and direct speech have all been used to engage the reader. This is important because the reader is a big part of creating those images. The image isn't just there on the page. The language has been designed to allow the reader to play an active role in imagining this scene and imagining this comedic farce.